Hi everyone, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time to have a look at some of these backing storage devices. What I'm going to do is give you the answers, those rough answers that I found, and talk you through some of the important points, so hopefully you can take them forward into your learning. Okay, so let's have a little look at the top category first of all. So looking at whether something is internal or whether they're kind of external portable. Okay, when you go along you can see that most of the smaller devices, the USB sticks, all of the CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays are portable. Your solid state drive can be portable or can be built in. I suppose that's similar to your hard disk drive, although that picture particularly is an internal one where you can see all the open parts. And then your card are all portable. So all the things that are kind of hard, have got not much moving parts, they're really good for portability because it means if you're going to take them with you, then you're not going to break them or anything. Okay. One thing I should say is that some of them are more portable than others. So if you're looking at something that's robust, so for example you're going to have something on your person or in your pocket, you'd be a lot safer having something like a USB stick or a memory card compared to having a CD or a DVD and Blu-ray. I don't know about you, but if you had one of them in your back pocket sat down on the bus, likely to probably snap that even if it's in a case. So you have to be careful about how you're going to be transporting it and what device would be best. Okay, underneath that we're looking at whether something is magnetic, optical or solid state. Now solid state means that it has no moving parts, so a lot of the more common and now up-to-date types of backing storage tend to be solid state, where we use this new technology where we don't need any moving parts. So USB sticks fall into that category. They have no moving parts. Neither do solid state drives, hence their name. And your cards, your SD cards, or your solid state cards, they don't have any moving parts either. So all three of them are solid states. With regards to our discs, they're all optical. They're read in the same way. Okay, so they go into a CD drive or a DVD drive inside your DVD machine or inside your computer, and a laser shines up onto that kind of coloured rainbow shiny material that you've seen on CDs and DVDs before, and it reads the information off, whether that be music, whether it be movies, whether it be a combination of both. Okay, and then we've got our hard disk drive, which is very different. It kind of almost works like it looks like it works like an old school record player where you've got the discs in the middle and then this kind of spindle arm that you can see very small here that turns onto the disc and it reads the information off like an old record player, but it does it using static and magnetic electricity to read the information off and to store the information onto there. So it's a very sophisticated piece of kit, but it's good if you want a lot of storage for a little bit cheaper than some of the non-moving part devices. Okay. The next category we've got is storage devices, storage capacities, sorry. So you can see just by looking across, there's a big kind of range in storage capacities. USB sticks and again the SD cards are very similar. They range from kind of 1-2 gig all the way up to 64, although you can get bigger than this. And same with your cards, they're probably about the same. If you have a little look at the hard disk drives and the solid state drives, they're quite large in their capacity. So if you think about the size of a gigabyte compared to a terabyte, there's 1,024 gigabytes in 1 terabyte. And if you could do 4 terabytes, that's a lot of gigs. You're talking about almost 5,000 gigs worth of information could be stored on one hard disk drive. And again, solid state drives can go really big. Now this is the really interesting part, CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays. It always blows my mind that a CD and a DVD and a Blu-ray, physically if you put them next to each other, in front of each other or next to each other on a table, they look the same. If they didn't have the label saying CD, DVD, Blu-ray, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference because not all Blu-rays are actually blue, it's just the colour of the skin they kind of put on them. Now, although they look the same, they work in really different ways. So CDs are just kind of like one layer, and they have these little tracks around them, these little circles that are kind of like an old school record. That's where you get that shine from. But with a DVD, they can store more information. So a CD can only store 700 megabytes, a DVD can store 4.7 gig, and that can be to do with whether it's a double layer DVD, so perhaps 2 layers stuck together, or where it's a double-sided DVD. Okay, so they kind of got different types of technology within the same amount of plastic they can store twice as much information. And that technology was kind of refurbed and used again when it came to the Blu-rays, and that's why the Blu-rays can store even more. In fact, they can store up to 50 gigabytes based on how many layers are built into the kind of disc itself. And again, whether you have that double-sided capacity to have 2 shiny sides and no label to be able to store loads of information. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is transfer speed. So this is how quickly they can get information from the disk or the device back into the computer system or vice versa. Okay, USBs, I've actually got two values here, because if you use USB 2, which is the ones that kind of have the black insert, plastic insert inside here, they can move 60 megabytes per second. But if you were to look up a USB 3, which is the ones where you usually see a blue plastic bit inside, which are slightly newer and more up to date, they can actually move 640 megabytes per second. So you might be looking at buying a USB stick and think, why is this one really cheap and this one really expensive? But the type of connection, although it looks the same, can be really different. Okay. Hard disk drives are pretty average, 100 megabytes per second. CDs are quite slow, and again it gets progressively better as you move through DVDs and Blu-rays. Your hard disk drives are extremely fast, so your solid state drives, are extremely fast and can move information between the solid state drive and the computer very quickly. And then you've got your cards, which again, kind of that similar range to USB sticks, 10 to 80 megabytes per second. Now you might have found different numbers here, so don't worry if your numbers don't match mine. I just tried to kind of find an average across the internet when I was doing my research, and this is what I came up with. Okay, the next category we're looking at is whether they're rewritable, read-only and recordable. For the most part, all of the different types of devices can be rewritable. What rewritable means is you can save something on it, you can delete it, you can save something else, you can delete it, you can save something else. Now with all devices, they have a lifespan, so it will be something like on each storage location in a USB memory stick you could maybe save 5,000 times, but after that it kind of runs out. Nobody tends to use it as much as that, in which case we've never really got to the stage that data doesn't work. But sometimes if you've had a USB stick and it's corrupted, perhaps you've maybe heard of that before, then that can have an impact as well. Okay, when it comes to your optical discs, however, so your CDs, your DVDs and your Blu-rays, they can come in different formats. So they sometimes come in a read-only format. So before, when you go to the shop and you would buy a music CD, for example, you couldn't save any information onto that. That was in read-only format because something had been put on it already. Again, excuse me, if you were to buy a DVD, it would usually be read-only because you've got a film on there. You don't want to be able to save over the top of, Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever it is you've been watching on DVD. What you also get these ones in is what's called a recordable format, which is really good if you want to save something that's important. So let's say, for example, that I had a bunch of documents for school I wanted to save, and then I wanted them to become read-only. What you do is you buy what's called a recordable disc, so it's known as a CD-R or a DVD-R or a Blu-ray-R. And what that does is allows you to save onto it once, and then for your project or whatever it is you've got in there to be saved nice and secure. Okay, and then it can't be rewritten over the top of. They can be a little bit cheaper, but they're quite good if you want to perhaps like distribute something to somebody else and give them a copy of something that you don't want them to be able to change. That's a really good example of when you might use it. Okay, with regards to prices, rather than actually put in prices, because you'll all have different answers for this, what I did is kind of put in whether they were expensive, mid-range, or whether they were cheap. So when it comes to CD, it's the cheapest form of all of them. DVDs and Blu-rays are quite cheap now as well. Okay, your USB sticks, hard drives and your cards are probably kind of mid-range. Depends on what size and what type you're going for. If you buy a USB 3 that's 64 gigabytes, that might be quite expensive. If you buy a USB 2 that's 2 gigabytes for a USB stick, it'll be really, really cheap. Okay, and again, same with the cards and your hard disk drive. It's just based on the sizes that you're going for as to whether the money goes up. Solid state drives are still a little bit more expensive. They're kind of your newest version of backing storage devices. So you want to make sure that that's kind of listed as one of your more expensive ones, just because the technology in them is a little bit newer. It's really robust. Stuff's not likely to get lost or broken inside there because there's no moving parts. So the kind of cost reflects that. Okay, and then the last thing I filled out was my kind of main uses. So USB sticks, I kind of said, were used for storing documents when you're transporting them between different computers. The hard disk drive is used mainly for storing information inside your computer, usually a desktop, but some old laptops have hard disk drives as well. CDs are usually used for music, which I mentioned earlier on. DVDs, again, usually used for films. Blu-rays usually used for films, but that of a higher quality, so perhaps ones that are going to be used with 4K TVs or 3D films. You've got storage inside the computer or outside the computer for your solid state drive. Either would be acceptable. And then your last one is usually for photographs and digital cameras. That's what your cards tend to be used for. Okay, so hopefully you've got most of that information. Don't worry about trying to remember it all. Just try to think about, if you were given some scenarios, whether you would be able to name which would be the best device to use and why. Okay, and with that in mind, let's move to our plenary for today's lesson. So in your PowerPoint file, the very last slide, the third slide of the 3 slides, should have these 4 scenarios. So I want you to have a little read through them and see if you can think for each scenario which type of backing storage devices would be the best to use. Again, your teacher has the answers if you want to check it before you go, or if not, you can check the answers next week. Hopefully that all makes sense. If you've got any questions, you can drop me a message on Satchel 1, and I hope you enjoyed your learning today. Speak to you next week, guys. Bye.